Listen, before I tell you what happened that night, I want you to lean in a little closer. I need you to hear the tremble in my voice, because what I'm about to share didn't just change my family. It changed me. You see, people think old age softens a woman. They think the wrinkles mean she's harmless, that her silence means she doesn't feel pain anymore. But I felt everything that day. Every forgotten moment. Every quiet room. Every empty phone. Every reminder that I had become invisible in the house I once built. And the most haunting part? They didn't just forget something small. They forgot me. It wasn't my birthday they forgot. No, that would have hurt but not destroyed me. What they forgot was something deeper. The one thing that showed me I was truly alone in my own family. And that night, when the truth came out, they were the ones who cried. I still remember waking up that morning with this strange feeling in my chest, as if the air itself was warning me. The sun was shining, but it felt cold. My hand shook a little when I reached for my robe, and I told myself it was just age. But deep down, I think my heart already knew. Knew the storm that was quietly waiting behind every smile my family pretended to give. You ever had a day that starts normal but feels wrong in your bones? Tell me, sweetheart. Have you ever sensed something was off even before anything happened? Just a yes or no. I want to see how many of you felt that. I walked into the living room and found my daughter busy on her laptop, typing so fast her fingers were almost a blur. She didn't look up. My grandson was glued to his phone, laughing at some video. My son-in-law rushed out the door with a travel mug, shouting something about being late. Not one pair of eyes lifted to meet mine. Not one voice said a simple, "Good morning." I stood there like a ghost, present but unseen, breathing but unnoticed. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. Life has a way of aging women into shadows when no one is watching. But something in me still waited, still hoped for someone to remember, for someone to look up, for someone to care. No one did. I made my own coffee, poured it into the ceramic cup my late husband had given me on our 40th anniversary, the cup with the chip on the rim and the fading paint. And when I held it, I swear, it felt like the only thing left in the house that still remembered me. I tried to start conversations. I asked my grandson about school, he shrugged. I asked my daughter if she slept well, she mumbled, "Fine." I asked my son-in-law where he was rushing. He waved me off. I kept thinking maybe they're busy. Maybe later they'll talk. Maybe later they'll remember. Maybe later they'll show me I still exist. But the hours passed and silence settled like dust. By noon, a heaviness wrapped around my chest. Something too sharp to be sadness and too deep to be disappointment. I sat alone on the edge of my bed, staring at an old photograph of my children when they were small. Back then they clung to me. They cried for me. They ran to me when they were scared. I was their world, their comfort, their shield. And now, I was an old woman taking up space in their home. I didn't mean to cry, but tears don't ask permission when your heart reaches its breaking point. They slipped down my cheeks quietly, soaking into the old quilt I'd sewn decades ago. I covered my mouth with my hand because I didn't want them to hear. Not because I cared what they thought, but because I didn't want my pain to sound dramatic. Dignity is all an old woman has left when love starts fading. Hours later, when evening crept in and the house filled with the smell of dinner, something snapped inside me. Not anger. Not bitterness. Something far stronger. A decision. If they could forget me so easily, then I needed to remind them who I truly was. Not through shouting. Not through guilt. But through the truth, raw, unfiltered, and unavoidable. I'm not proud of what I did that night. But I don't regret it either. Because sometimes the only way to open someone's eyes is to make them cry with the truth they've been avoiding. While they ate, I prepared something quietly in my room. Something they never expected. Something that would make them look at me again. Not as a burden, not as background noise, but as the woman who sacrificed everything for them. And when I stepped out later that night holding the thing they had all forgotten, everything stopped. Forks froze midair. Conversation died. Faces went pale. For the first time in years, they finally saw me. And sweetheart, if you're still listening, I want you to stay with me, because the next part will make your heart twist in ways you're not prepared for. What happened that night didn't just break my family. It exposed them. Before I tell you the rest, promise me you'll stick with me until the end. Tap the like button, tap the subscribe, whatever helps you stay right here with me. Because I'm not done. Not even close. I wish I could tell you that when they finally looked at me, really looked at me, the world softened and everything suddenly made sense. But it didn't. Their faces froze because they realized something they never expected. I had been keeping a secret. A secret they should have remembered. A secret they once promised never to forget. But before I tell you what I was holding, let me take you back a few hours before that night, back to the moment I truly realized how invisible I had become. Sometimes the truth doesn't hit you all at once. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, like a shadow inching across the floor until it touches your toes. I tried so hard that afternoon to stay hopeful. I baked cookies the way my grandson used to love them, half chocolate, half peanut butter, the way he begged for when he was little. Do you want to know what he said when he walked into the kitchen and smelled them? Oh, those? I'm not eating sugar this week. Not a thank you, not even a smile. I watched him grab a protein bar from the pantry and head right back to his room. My daughter barely glanced at me when I asked if she wanted to try one. She murmured something about carbs and deadlines and went back to typing. My son-in-law didn't notice the cookies at all. He was too busy talking loudly on the phone about some deal he was making, walking in and out as if the house wasn't a home but a hotel lobby. And the worst part? They didn't do any of it with cruelty. They did it with casual neglect, the kind that stings deeper because it isn't intentional. Just forgetting. The silent kind of forgetting that grows slowly until one day, the person forgotten realizes there's nothing left to hold on to. Tell me honestly, sweetheart, have you ever done something kind for someone, and they didn't even notice? Just a simple yes or no. I want to know if you've ever felt that sting. When the sun started setting, I went to my room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't want them to think I was upset. I just closed it gently, quietly, the way someone does when they're too tired to pretend anymore. I sat on the old wooden chair by the window and watched the sky turn orange, then purple, then dark. The colors melted into each other the way my memories did. Some bright, some fading. I reached under my bed and pulled out a dusty wooden box, one I hadn't touched in years. The lid stuck a little, as if the box itself didn't want to be opened. Inside were pieces of myself. Old letters. Faded photographs. A key. A gold bracelet. And at the very bottom, the thing they had forgotten. The thing that broke me more than anything. A small folded paper. My handwriting. A message I wrote years ago. No one else knew what it said. No one even remembered it existed. But they should have. Because it was a promise every one of them made to me. A promise that night would force them to face. As I held it, my hands shook. Not from age this time, but from the weight of remembering everything they had forgotten. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. For a moment I even thought about tearing it up, letting the past stay buried. Maybe it was better that way. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe I should just accept that life moves on and people forget things, even important things. But then I heard my daughter's laugh from the living room. Not a cruel laugh, just an easy, light laugh. The kind she used to share with me when she was small. When she would run into my arms and bury her face in my neck. I used to be her safe place. Now I was something she found sweet but exhausting. I stood up slowly, walked to the mirror and looked at myself. Do you know what I saw? A woman who had given too much. A woman who had been brave all her life. A woman who had survived heartbreak, loss, poverty, war, betrayal. Yet somehow she was still afraid to speak the truth to her own family. I wiped my tears, smoothed my hair, and held the paper tightly in my fist. I wasn't weak. I wasn't broken. I had simply been quiet too long. That night, when they gathered around the dinner table, I walked in holding the wooden box. They didn't notice right away. My daughter was scrolling through her phone. My grandson had his earbuds in. My son-in-law was cutting his steak while muttering about something he saw online. I stood there for several seconds waiting for someone to look up. No one did. So I cleared my throat. They looked up as if surprised I was still in the house. My daughter smiled politely. Mom, do you need something? I didn't speak. I just placed the wooden box in the center of the table. The sound of it touching the wood made them all go silent. My grandson took out one earbud. What's that? My voice didn't shake when I answered. Something you all forgot. The way their faces shifted. Confusion first, then discomfort. Sent a strange strength through me. For once, they weren't the center of the conversation. For once, they were the ones unsure. For once, they were the ones who didn't know what was coming. My daughter laughed lightly. Mom, what do you mean? Did we forget something around the house? I opened the lid of the box slowly, like revealing a wound. When they saw what was inside, their smiles faded. My daughter's eyes widened. My grandson leaned forward. My son-in-law looked away. They all knew. They remembered. And that was the moment I realized, forgetting hadn't been an accident. It had been a choice. You promised me, I whispered. All of you did. My daughter's voice cracked. Mom, please don't bring that up tonight. But I had already brought it up. And I wasn't stopping now. Because this was the night they would finally understand what their silence had done to me. The night they cried wasn't because of anger. It was because of truth. Sweetheart, the thing they forgot? It wasn't small. It wasn't a date or a task or a memory. It was something far deeper. And it was going to change everything. If you're still here, stay close. Because the next part will shake you. Do you ever feel the weight of years sitting on your shoulders, even when no one notices? That night I felt every year, every ache, every memory of sacrifices I had made for them. And it all came crashing down in that living room. I wish I could describe the look on their faces when I opened that wooden box, but words are too weak. Shock, confusion, fear, guilt. Every emotion collided in an instant, and I stood there, holding the proof that they had forgotten me. Not just my birthday, not just a gift, but the very essence of my presence in their lives. Inside the box was everything they had ever promised me they would remember. The letters I had written when I was raising them alone after their father died. The small tokens I had kept. The scraps of memories that bound us together when life got hard. And in the very center, the piece that truly made their hearts stop. A letter I had written decades ago, one that predicted the exact moment they might forget me. The day they might fail to see me for the woman I had always been. I had sealed it, hidden it, waited for the moment it would matter most. That night it did. I watched my daughter reach for the box, trembling, her hands shaking as she opened it. She pulled out the first letter, her eyes scanning the words. Her lips moved, silently forming apologies, but the words never came out. She looked at me as if suddenly she could see the little girl she once held in her arms, the child she had promised to never forget. My grandson leaned over her shoulder, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, trying to grasp why this old woman me was standing there, holding the truth of their neglect in her hands. And my son-in-law, well, he just stared, pale, caught in the middle of a guilt he could no longer hide behind his busy life. You know, when you realize the people you love most have hurt you without meaning to. It's like stepping into cold water. Your body shivers, your heart races, and your mind screams at you to escape. But you don't escape. Not that night. That night I stayed. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to see me. To understand. I said nothing at first. I let them absorb the sight of the box, the letters, the decades of memories I had preserved. I let the silence stretch, heavy and thick, wrapping around all of us like a shadow. And then I spoke, my voice calm, but carrying the weight of every lonely day I had endured. You promised, I said softly. You promised you'd never forget me. Not this part of me. My daughter's eyes filled with tears. Mom, she couldn't finish. The words stuck in her throat because she knew I was right. Every one of them knew. Have you ever had someone look at you and not say a word, but you could feel the guilt spilling out of their chest like water from a broken vase? That's what it felt like. That's what it looked like. I looked at my grandson then. Do you see now? I asked him. Do you see why I waited? Do you see why I saved these things? Do you understand what it feels like to be invisible to the people you love most? He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I didn't know. His voice was quiet, almost breaking. I never realized. And that's the truth, isn't it? People rarely realize how much they hurt the ones they love until they see the proof. Until they witness it. Until it's too raw to ignore. I walked around the table slowly, letting my hands brush against the letters, the photos, the little mementos of our lives together. Each item had a story. Each item carried a memory. And each item reminded them and me of what they had forgotten. I could feel the tears pooling in my own eyes again. But this time I didn't hide them. I let them fall because tears carry strength. Tears tell the story words sometimes can't. And that night my tears told them everything. Do you remember this? I asked my daughter, holding up a small, worn photograph of the three of us on a beach, the sun setting behind us, laughter frozen in time. Her hand shook as she took it. Do you remember what it felt like when we took this picture? Do you remember who held you when you were scared of the waves? She nodded, tears streaking down her face. Yes, I remember. You should, I said softly, because those memories aren't just pictures. They are the proof that love existed, that I existed, that I fought for you all when you didn't see me. My grandson reached for another letter, his small fingers brushing mine. Grandma, why did you keep all this hidden? I smiled faintly, though it hurt. Because sometimes the ones you love the most are the ones who need to see the truth the hardest. And sometimes, waiting for that moment makes it even stronger. The room was quiet, except for the sound of tears and shallow breathing. I could feel the shift, the realization settling into their hearts. They weren't just sorry, they were stunned. They were broken. And I felt a strange satisfaction. Not revenge. Not anger. But the deep, undeniable satisfaction of finally being seen. I put the last item back in the box, my hand steady now, my mind clear. Tonight, I said, you will remember me. Not just for what I did for you, but for who I am. And if you can't remember the woman who raised you, loved you, and fought for you every day, then I will remind you until you do. Sweetheart, have you ever held someone accountable? Not in anger, but in love? I want you to think about that. Sometimes the hardest truth is the one that carries the most love. By the time the night ended, my family was changed. My daughter hugged me so tightly it almost hurt. My grandson clung to me, his small arms wrapped around my neck like he wanted to make up for years of forgetfulness in one embrace. And my son-in-law, well, he didn't say much, but his eyes said everything. He finally saw me. The real me. Not the invisible woman in the corner. Not the quiet old lady they ignored. The woman who deserved to be remembered. And in that moment I realized something important. Sometimes you have to let the people you love see the weight of their actions. Sometimes the only way to be heard is to show the proof. Sometimes you have to let them cry, not because you want revenge, but because you want them to understand. If you're still here listening to me, don't turn away yet. This story isn't finished. There's still something more I need to tell you about that night. Something that no one expected. Something that left my family speechless in a way I never could have imagined. I'll never forget the look on their faces that night. You know, the kind of look that makes you realize someone has finally fully understood the gravity of what they've done. My daughter's hands were trembling as she held the letters, my grandson's eyes were wide, and my son-in-law, well, he couldn't look at me straight, as if the weight of years of neglect had physically pushed him down. And it hit me then, the truth that had been simmering in the back of my mind all day. Sometimes people forget not because they don't care, but because they've been blind to what's right in front of them. I took a deep breath and walked to the corner of the living room where the old piano sat, gathering dust. Do you remember the piano you grew up with, the one that held your first songs and first memories? This piano had been a silent witness to decades of my life, to the laughter of children, to the tears of parents, to the quiet nights when I cried alone. And tonight it would speak again. I pressed my hands against the keys, cold and familiar, and played a single note. Then another. Slowly, a melody emerged, shaky at first, like an old woman remembering something she had almost forgotten herself. But as the note spread through the room, I could see it in their faces, the recognition, the nostalgia, the sudden understanding that this melody, this sound, was tied to every memory they had ignored. Do you know that feeling when music reaches into your chest and drags every hidden emotion out into the open? That's what happened that night. I kept playing, each note telling a story of forgotten birthdays, of quiet sacrifices, of love given and overlooked. The tears that had started as sadness turned into something more powerful, revelation. And slowly, one by one, they began to realize just how much I had carried for them, and how blind they had been to it. My daughter finally whispered, almost inaudibly, "Mom, I had no idea." And I looked at her. Really looked at her. The little girl who used to cling to me in fear of the dark. The teenager who rolled her eyes at my advice. The woman who now thought she was too busy to remember me. I saw them all. And I said softly but with unwavering strength, "No, you didn't. And that's why you needed to see this night. This is what it feels like to be forgotten." My grandson sat on the edge of the sofa, gripping my hand. "Grandma, Why didn't you say anything sooner? He asked, voice breaking. And that, my dear, is the question I had been asking myself for years. Why hadn't I spoken up sooner? Why hadn't I demanded that they see me before it came to this night? But sometimes silence teaches the hardest lessons, and tonight, I needed them to learn the weight of their forgetfulness fully. I walked around the room slowly, letting them feel the presence I had kept hidden for so long. I let them see the pain I had endured quietly, the nights I had spent waiting for a call that never came, the mornings I had awoken to a house that felt colder with each passing year. And as I spoke, their expressions shifted from confusion to shock, from shock to regret, from regret to tears. Real tears. Not polite, quiet ones, but deep, aching sobs that came from the core of knowing they had wronged me. Do you understand now? I asked, looking at each of them in turn. Do you see what it feels like to be invisible to the people you love? To wake up every day hoping someone notices you, and finding no one does? Have you ever had someone's silence cut deeper than any argument ever could? Think about it, take a moment to remember. That silence speaks volumes. It's louder than any scream. And that's what they heard that night. I moved back to the piano, my fingers brushing the keys lightly. This is my story, I said. Not the story I tell strangers, not the story I whisper to myself at night. But the story you need to see, the story you need to remember. And you will remember it because tonight you can't forget it. The room felt heavy, charged, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My daughter reached out to me, finally letting herself be vulnerable. My grandson rested his head on my shoulder, and even my son-in-law's shoulders sagged under the weight of realization. And then, slowly, I opened the box again, showing them the letters, the photographs, the tokens, each one a testament to the love I had given, the sacrifices I had made, and the years I had been quietly invisible. They all wept, and it wasn't just because they had hurt me. It was because they understood, truly understood, the depth of what they had forgotten. And in that moment something shifted. I wasn't just a forgotten woman in their house. I was a force they couldn't ignore. A memory they couldn't erase. A presence they would never overlook again. I stopped playing the piano and looked at them. Tonight, I said, voice steady but soft, you will remember me. Not because I demanded it, not because I shouted, but because you finally saw the truth. And sometimes, that's the only way people learn. I let a pause hang in the air, letting the gravity of my words sink in. And then I added, almost as an afterthought, and let me tell you, you're not the only ones learning tonight. I'm learning too. Learning that strength isn't always loud. That love isn't always rewarded. That silence sometimes teaches the hardest lessons of all. The tears kept flowing, and I could see that each sob, each trembling hand, each tear-streaked face was a silent promise to never forget again. They didn't say it, they couldn't. But I could see it in their eyes. And that, my dear, is sometimes louder than words. Sweetheart, here's a question for you. Have you ever waited for someone to see you, really see you, and finally realized you had to make them? Just type yes or no. I want to know if you've ever had to hold your ground this way. And before I move on, listen carefully, because what comes next is something even they didn't expect. Something that would change not just their night, but our entire family. It's the part that made them understand beyond tears, beyond apologies. The part that made them cry in a way they never had before. The moment that changed everything didn't come from words, at least not at first. It came from silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and rattles your chest. I could feel it as I looked at them. My daughter, my grandson, my son-in-law, all frozen, their eyes wide with fear and awe. That's when I realized the full power of what I had in my hands, of what they had ignored for decades. They didn't just forget a birthday or a day or a simple promise. They had forgotten the woman who raised them, the woman who bled for them in ways they could never understand until now. I walked to the corner where the box lay, my fingers brushing over the worn wood, over the letters and tokens of my life. Then I picked up the key. The tiny brass key my late husband had given me on the night we first moved into that house. It was the key to the safety deposit box where I had stored the most important secrets of my life. The kind of secrets that could break a heart, or two. That night I decided it was time they knew. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because sometimes the truth is the only way to save a family. You all remember when I told you that I had a surprise for tonight? I asked softly, holding their gaze. My daughter nodded, her eyes still wide, her hands trembling. My grandson leaned forward, curious despite his fear. My son-in-law didn't move, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the tightness of his hands. I continued, this surprise, it's not just about today. It's about every time I was invisible. Every time you forgot who I was. Every time you thought I wouldn't notice. I could feel the air in the room thicken as I slowly opened the envelope that accompanied the key. Inside was a folded piece of paper, handwritten in my shaky letters, filled with secrets I had never dared to share. The kind of secrets that make you look at your loved ones differently once you reveal them. My hand shook as I unfolded it, and I began to read aloud. This is the night you will finally remember me, I said, my voice steady but carrying a weight that made even the walls seem to lean in. This is the night you will understand what it feels like to be invisible, what it feels like to be ignored by the people you love most. And this, I held the key high, letting the dim light glint off its brass surface, is proof. Proof that sometimes the smallest things can carry the heaviest truths. I could see their hearts pounding. They weren't sure whether to ask questions, move closer, or run. And that's when I realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. I held power that night, not over them but over their awareness. I had waited years for this moment, and I was going to make it count. Do you know what it's like to finally hold something that has the power to change everything? Tell me. Have you ever had that feeling? Just yes or no. Because I want you to understand the weight of anticipation. The trembling knowing that what you're about to do will never be forgotten. I guided them to the table, my hand steady now, my heart racing. I placed the key and the paper in the center and said, inside that safe deposit box is everything I've ever saved. Every memory, every moment, every secret I've carried. And tonight you will see it, not because I want to punish you, but because I want you to remember that love requires attention. That promises require keeping. And that forgetting, sometimes forgetting destroys more than words ever can. My daughter's voice cracked. Mom, we never meant. I held up my hand. I know, but intention doesn't erase impact. And tonight you'll see the impact. Slowly, carefully, I led them to the study where I kept the key to the box. My grandson's fingers brushed mine as we walked, and I felt him trembling. Not from fear, but from the anticipation of witnessing something he couldn't yet comprehend. My daughter followed, clutching her hands together. And my son-in-law brought up the rear, his face pale, almost ghost-like. We reached the box and I inserted the key. It clicked. That sound alone seemed to echo through the house like a bell tolling for forgotten years. I lifted the lid, revealing the contents inside. Photos, letters, keepsakes, even small objects that held untold stories. Each piece carefully preserved, waiting for the right moment. And that moment was now. As they looked, I could see the floodgates open. My daughter gasped, tears rolling down her cheeks. Mom, I didn't realize. I know, I whispered. You didn't. But now you do. And you will remember me. My grandson reached for a small envelope, opened it, and pulled out a letter addressed to him when he was just a child. His eyes widened as he read my words, words he had never heard before. And suddenly he threw his arms around me, crying softly, whispering, I'm so sorry, Grandma. I never knew. And in that moment something shifted. They weren't just seeing me, they were feeling me. Every choice I had made, every quiet sacrifice, every day of being overlooked, it all pressed into their hearts. The room became a witness to a truth that couldn't be denied. I had been patient, I had been quiet, I had been invisible, but I had also been powerful. And now finally they understood. I looked at them and asked softly, do you see now? Can you feel what it's like to be forgotten? Have you ever had to teach someone the value of presence? Think about that. And imagine doing it with everything you have. That's what I was doing that night. By the end of it, the house was silent except for soft sobs and whispered apologies. No one said anything more. No one needed to. The weight of understanding hung in the air, heavy and unbroken. And in that silence I felt something I hadn't felt in years: validation. Recognition. The knowledge that finally they saw me. Truly saw me. Sweetheart, the next part, the final part, is where everything they forgot comes together. Where the tears, the apologies, the understanding, and even the fear transform into something they'll never forget for the rest of their lives. By the time we left the study, the house was quiet, but the energy had shifted. You could feel it like the air itself was holding its breath. My family had seen everything. Every secret, every letter, every memory I had preserved for decades. They had finally realized what it meant to forget me. And yet, even in their newfound awareness, there was something more they needed to see. Something I had been waiting for all my life to show them. The culmination of all those forgotten moments. The proof that neglect and love are two sides of the same coin. And the night that would finally make them cry in a way they would never forget. I led them back to the living room, where the wooden box rested quietly on the table, its contents now partially revealed, partially hidden. "You've seen pieces of my life tonight," I said, my voice steady but carrying the weight of years. "But you haven't seen everything. Not yet. There's one final thing I need you to understand." I opened the box fully, pulling out a worn leather-bound journal. Its cover was soft from years of handling, its pages yellowed and frayed. "This," I said, placing it gently on the table, "is where I wrote everything I never told you. Every thought, every fear, every heartbreak, every moment of pride and pain I've experienced as your mother and grandmother. And tonight you will read it." Their eyes widened. My daughter leaned closer, her fingers brushing the cover as if she was afraid it might vanish. My grandson hesitated, glancing at me nervously, while my son-in-law seemed frozen, unsure whether he wanted to know what he was about to see. But I could see it in all of them, the curiosity, the recognition that they were about to witness the real me, not the quiet, invisible woman who had been ignored for so long. I opened the journal to the first page and began to read aloud. "I have lived a life full of love, pain, and perseverance. I have raised children who now may not see me as I truly am. I have waited decades for acknowledgement, for understanding, for the simple recognition of my existence. Tonight my family will see the truth they have forgotten, and perhaps by seeing it, they will finally remember me." As I read, their faces changed. My daughter's lips trembled, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. My grandson's small hands gripped mine, as though anchoring himself to the weight of my words. And my son-in-law, pale and quiet, could no longer hide the emotions building behind his eyes. They were experiencing the depth of my life, the sacrifices they had ignored, and the love I had poured into them silently day after day. I paused mid-sentence, glancing at them. "Tell me," I asked gently, "have you ever truly listened to someone's heart without interruptions, without excuses? Have you ever let someone's life speak to you?" I gave them a moment, watching as they processed the question. My grandson whispered almost too softly to hear, "No, not really." My daughter shook her head, tears now freely falling, and my son-in-law swallowed hard, realizing the truth behind my words. I smiled faintly, though my own eyes stung. "Then tonight will teach you. Tonight will make you feel what forgetting someone really means. Not just a day missed, not just a word ignored, but the lifetime of moments that go unnoticed until it's almost too late." Turning the pages slowly, I read aloud stories from their childhoods, moments they had forgotten or overlooked. Stories of scraped knees and late-night fears, of laughter in the kitchen and whispered secrets in the dark. I recounted the nights I had stayed awake when they were sick, the sacrifices I had made to give them opportunities one never had, the silent prayers I whispered for their happiness. And with each story I saw the impact. Tears rolled freely, choked sobs broke the silence, and their hands trembled as they reached for each other, seeking comfort, seeking forgiveness, seeking connection. "You see," I said softly, closing the journal gently, "this is what happens when you forget someone. The pain doesn't lie. It doesn't vanish. It lingers, grows, and becomes a shadow over every unspoken moment. Tonight you've seen that shadow. Tonight you've felt it. And now you will remember." My daughter finally spoke, voice breaking with emotion. "Mom, we didn't realize we were so blind. I'm so sorry." My grandson clung to me, whispering, "Grandma, I'll never forget again." Even my son-in-law's voice shook. We should have seen this sooner. We're sorry." I nodded slowly, a tear sliding down my cheek. "Apologies are just words," I said softly. "Tonight I wanted you to feel, to understand, to remember." And then I did something unexpected. I stood, walked to the window, and looked outside at the dark night. "You see," I said, turning back to them, "forgetting isn't just about missing a day. It's about missing a person. And if you forget someone, you have to be ready to feel the consequences. You have to be ready to confront the truth you ignored for so long. I paused, letting my words hang in the air. The room was silent except for the sound of soft, heavy breaths and tears falling to the floor. Their eyes were wide, faces pale, and I could see the realization settle deeply into their hearts. I had made them feel the weight of forgetting. I had made them understand the depth of my love, my life, and my presence. Sweetheart, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to make someone truly see you, the real you, after years of being ignored? Type yes or no in your mind, because that's what I did that night. I didn't shout. I didn't demand. I simply showed them the truth in a way they could never forget. By the end of the night, my family was changed. Not just by tears, not just by words, but by the undeniable weight of truth. They had seen, they had felt, and they had cried. And in that moment I realized something powerful. Sometimes the most emotional victories don't come from yelling or confronting. They come from letting the truth speak for itself, letting silence carry the weight, and allowing the ones you love to finally see you. The night wasn't over when the tears began to fall, not just from sadness, but from realization. You see, my family thought the crying was about a forgotten birthday, about some silly oversight. But they didn't understand. Not until that night did they realize the weight of years they had ignored me. Every smile I had faked when I felt unseen. Every meal I had cooked for them alone while they rushed by without a glance. Every whispered prayer for their happiness that went unnoticed. Tonight, it all came to the surface, raw and undeniable. I watched my daughter sit quietly, tears streaming down her face as she held my hands in hers. My grandson's small frame shook with sobs as he whispered, "Grandma, I never meant to forget." Even my son-in-law, who rarely showed emotion, sat slumped in his chair, silent, his face pale but honest. That's when I realized. This was bigger than me, bigger than anger, bigger than pride. This was the night my family remembered who I truly was, and I had given them that gift in the only way they could understand. I walked slowly to the window and looked out at the night sky. The streetlights flickered softly, the stars shimmered faintly, and the cool breeze brushed against my cheek. I could feel it in my bones, the shift, the subtle transformation of our lives. They weren't just sorry, they were changed. And yet, there was one more truth they needed to see, one final piece of the lesson that night had been building toward. I turned back to them, my voice calm but commanding. You see, love isn't about remembering dates or giving gifts. Love is about presence. Love is about noticing. Love is about holding someone in your heart when the world tries to ignore them. And tonight you finally understood that. But there's one last thing I need you to see. From the wooden box I pulled out a small, simple envelope, yellowed with age. Inside was a letter I had written decades ago, one I had never sent. It wasn't a birthday card, a note, or a gift. It was my truth, my heart laid bare, addressed to all of them together. I handed it to my daughter first, then my grandson, then my son-in-law, letting them each read silently. The silence was heavy. I watched their faces shift from curiosity to shock, from shock to regret, and finally to tears. My daughter's hands trembled as she clutched the paper. My grandson's lips quivered as he tried to speak. My son-in-law's jaw tightened, and then he leaned forward, whispering, "Grandma, I didn't realize. I had no idea." And that's when I knew. I had made them feel the full weight of forgetting, the full depth of invisibility, and the full power of love unacknowledged. This letter, these tears, this moment, they weren't just about me being remembered. They were about understanding what it meant to love someone fully, truly, and consciously. Do you know that feeling when someone finally sees you, the real you, after years of being invisible? Have you ever experienced that? Just imagine it, the warmth, the relief, the power of being acknowledged. That's what I gave them that night. That's what they had earned. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Peace. I sat down, letting the tension drain from my body. "Tonight," I said softly, "you've learned the cost of forgetting. But more importantly, you've learned the power of remembering. Remembering isn't just for birthdays or anniversaries. It's for every day, every moment, every act of love. When you forget, you wound. When you remember, you heal." My daughter leaned her head on my shoulder. My grandson hugged me tightly, and even my son-in-law reached out, resting his hand on mine. The room was silent except for the soft sound of tears and quiet breathing. And then in that silence I smiled. Not because I had made them cry, but because I had finally made them see. Finally made them understand. Finally reminded them that love requires awareness, presence, and action. I took a deep breath, letting the emotion settle. Remember this night, I said gently. Remember how it feels to almost lose someone through neglect. Remember what it's like to see the consequences of forgetting. And remember that I will always be here, even when you fail to notice, waiting for you to finally see me. And then, something unexpected happened. My grandson, little as he was, looked up at me with wet eyes and said, "Grandma, will you forgive us?" I smiled through my tears. "I already have, sweetheart," I said. And that's the real gift tonight. Not anger, not revenge, but forgiveness. Because that's what makes love stronger than neglect. That's what makes family unbreakable. Even after years of forgetting. My daughter whispered, "We'll never forget again. I promise." My son-in-law nodded silently, the truth of my words sinking in. And as they wrapped themselves around me, holding me tightly, I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before. This night, this moment, this story was the proof that even after being ignored, unseen, or forgotten, a heart that loves fiercely can still command respect, awareness, and tears of acknowledgement. Sweetheart, have you ever had to teach someone the depth of your love by showing them the truth they refuse to see? Think about it. And remember this story. Sometimes you have to let your life speak louder than words. Sometimes tears are the only way to be remembered. By the end of the night, my family had learned the most important lesson. Love is not measured by gifts or dates. It's measured by presence, attention, and the courage to never let someone feel invisible. And as they finally cried, finally understood, finally remembered me, I felt a joy so deep, so fierce, that even the years of being unseen could not diminish it. That night my family cried. But they also remembered. And I finally felt seen.